everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. And like Navati said, I'm Bhuma Balasubramani, a data scientist at Microsoft, and I recently graduated with a PhD in computer science from the University of Illinois at Chicago. My research is focused on geospatial data analytics, among the other areas. The field of spatial data analytics is a very well established one, but we see far less women in conferences related to geospatial data. So I just wanted to bring more attention to this topic within the Women Who Code community. And I hope this talk encourages some of you to explore and get involved in several of the open problems in this field. I cannot stress enough on the importance of this topic in today's scenario, be it healthcare, community development, or the vision of smart cities. The continuously emerging demand for analytics ready integrated data across different domains to solve complex location oriented problems has opened up a lot of opportunities for the exploration and analysis of spatial data. That said, this talk is a gentle introduction to geospatial data integration. And here's the agenda for today. We will look at what geospatial data is, what spatial data integration is, why is geospatial data integration special, like, what are the common challenges in integrating spatial data, and what are some of the state of the art techniques for GDI. And we will also look at one real world example and see how spatial data integration helps in that scenario. So, what is geospatial data? The term geospatial data is used interchangeably with spatial and geographic data. It refers to any data that has some geographic component to it. So, as the location changes, the value of that feature changes as well. For example, you can think about temperature, right? It varies depending on the location. Where does it snow? Why does it snow there? And how does it impact the vegetation in that area? We study all of these by analyzing spatial data. For non-spatial data, the location doesn't matter. For example, my bank account number isn't going to change irrespective of, like which city I live in, irrespective of whether it is Seattle or Chicago, my bank account number is going to stay the same. And spatial data can also be associated with different data types. It could be points, lines, or regions. So points data, you can think about points representing location of real objects. For example, potholes, like you see in the map right here. That is too many potholes in Chicago. But yeah, lines is like two or more points connected to represent linear features. For example, streets. And regions, they could be single polygon or multiple polygons with the same value for that feature. For example, your high school boundaries or census blocks or census tracts and so on. Moving on to geospatial data integration, the topic of our talk today. The advances in information storage and sensing technologies have accelerated the availability of a tremendous volume of public accessible data over the internet. So we now have a lot of geolocated and timestamp data that is easily available from sources such as open data portals. For example, opengrid.io, which is the open data portal of the city of Chicago. And you also have a lot of sensors, you have satellite imagery and social media like Twitter, Google Places, Yelp, and whatnot. So, to make better use of such data and to identify the relationships between different factors, integration of data from various of such sources become necessary. So geospatial data integration, it involves combining two or more geospatial data sets to facilitate analysis, reasoning, querying, and data visualization. For example, if you want to answer the query like which streets in the 5 mile radius of school boundary B has more than one pothole, right? So to answer this query, you may need to look at different data sets like location of potholes, where are the streets, and what are the high school boundaries. So to integrate all of these data sets, I mean, like to answer this query, we need to leverage all of these data sets and perform geospatial data integration. So the availability of data in itself is not sufficient to bring the concept of data integration to its full potential. So one of the main reasons is that data come from disparate sources. They are collected by different people Different people use different tools and techniques to collect the data, and it is stored in different databases. So they are fundamentally heterogeneous. And spatial data is even more special because it poses a lot of different challenges, and let's see what they are. For one, spatial data exhibits different types of heterogeneity. It could be in structure or schema and semantics. So one of them is syntactic heterogeneity, where the spatial data is stored in different formats. So if you look here, like one of the data sets can be represented as a shapefile, which is one way to represent a map, and the other data set could be a JSON file. So there could also be structural or schematic heterogeneity. The data model could be the same, but the schema could be different. For example, these are screenshots from two different weather apps. And if we look at these two weather apps, one of them have temperature as daily temperature, and the other has hourly temperature. And the temperature could also be represented in Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius. So the other kind of heterogeneity that is quite common in spatial data is the semantic heterogeneity, when the same entity has different names, or like same name is used to refer different entities. For example, think of Chicago and Windy City. So they refer to one and the same location. So that is an example for semantic heterogeneity. And we also have resolution. Resolution is more like the pixel size, the amount of data that can be observed from that pixel. So the lower that number, the finer the clarity. For example, if we look at this figure right here, you have two, like images, one with 4-meter resolution and the other with 1-meter resolution. They are pointing to the same location, but the resolution is different, and hence the amount of data that you can encode in them is different. Uncertainty is like the difference between the occurrence in reality and how it is represented in the database. So it could be due to a lot of factors. Some of them are like you have measurement errors, you have very limited observations of data, and also different but equally valid interpretations of the geography and so on. So if you take a look at the census data that we have, we say, oh, the population is like 500 plus or minus 10 people in a given census block. The plus or minus 10, the delta that we are seeing there is what we call as uncertainty. And we also have inconsistency. So it is more like, the imperfection in data, which is caused by the coexistence of two facts that are contradictory. For example, let's consider the data sets that talk about the distance between two cities, right? Let's say one data set has the distance between Seattle and Redmond as 13 miles. And in the other data set, the distance between Redmond and Seattle is 14.1 miles. So this may be because the boundaries of geographical entities like hills or lakes or any waterways, they cannot be determined with precision. So this is one reason for inconsistency, but then there are a lot more. We also have data transformation. So the data is in one form, but the nature of the process is in another form. For example, if you look at meteorological processes occurring over a continuum, but then they are recorded as a point observation. For example, like rainfall, right? So they occur over a continuum. It just doesn't rain at one particular point, right? But then it is measured at different points, and then you just average out the data for a rainfall. So that is data transformation. And the other common, challenge is the change of support problem. So spatial data are observed at different scales. Consider, like school districts and census tracts. So let's say, for example, in this image, they are referring to the same location, but then, like the way or the geographical boundaries for the school districts and the geographical boundaries for the census tracts are different. Sometimes these boundaries are like nested, sometimes they just overlap with each other, and so on. Let's say we need to take a look at whether the poverty rate in that area has any impact on the performance of school children. Then we may need to look at school districts and census tracts, which have different boundaries for a given location. So these are some of the challenges. There are like way more than this, but I guess this should give you an idea of why, like spatial data is special. And there are a number of approaches for geospatial data integration, depending on what type of data formats we have, what kind of challenges the data sets pose, and so on. So let's take a look at some of the most common approaches for GDI. The first one is conflation. So conflation is where you combine overlapping spatial data sets to produce a better data set with higher accuracy or more information, right? So it could be overlapping either horizontally or vertically. Horizontally meaning you could have more data or features for the same location. Let's consider Chicago. So one data set has, like population data, another data set has age group data. So if you have to merge or if you have to integrate these two, then it is, like horizontal conflation because you have just one location, but then multiple different features. So it will add more information, right? And then there is vertical conflation. So here, like you have same data for adjacent locations. Let's say we are looking at population data, and like one data set is for Chicago and another data set is for Evanston. So when you look at like data for different locations, but you are going to talk about the same information, which is population data, then it is vertical conflation. So conflation is needed in several fields, ranging from transportation planning to the analysis of historical data sets. So these require the use of multiple data sources. Um, so the process of conflation goes like this. You identify the features that correspond to the same object in reality. In our case, it could be the same spatial object, for example, like Chicago, right? And then we merge the geometry and attributes of those features. So that is conflation. And then we have a lot of different spatial functions. If you have like seen or heard about ArcGIS, so there are several tools, several GIS tools like QGIS or ArcGIS, and even languages like PostgreSQL. They allow the use of spatial functions such as disjoint, meets, inside, and so on. So to determine whether, for example, location A is inside location B, one example could be, is Forever 21 outlet inside the West Side Mall? So these are some kind of queries that you can answer with spatial functions. And we also have something called polygon overlay. So it involves superimposing like two or more data layers, and it produces a composite layer which is derived from the intersection of polygons in the individual data layers. So the attributes and respective values for the derived polygons in the output layer, they are obtained by combining the corresponding attributes from the input data layers. For example, let's take block 3, right? So this block 3 right here, it has, like part of block 3 is a hospital and part of block 3 is a park. So that is how like the data is distributed to the derived polygons in the overlaid layer. And the other approach is like multivariate mapping. So maps that show two or more variables for comparative purposes. For example, like think about climate maps. They are compiled from direct measures like humidity, temperature variation, and so on, as well as from indirect measures like vegetation coverage and type. So it is difficult to have like a perfect correspondence between these features, and people used to do this manually. Sometimes they just average out the data over different zones. For example, if you see in this map right here, you have like county level change in diversity since 2000, and in this map it shows two features, right? Like low diversity, I mean like whether the diversity is high or low, and it also looks at how much has it changed, like since the past 1 year or the past 10 years. So you have like multiple different features that are represented in the same map. It's not just like the color schema. Sometimes you can also add more symbols to like show, for example, like what kind of metals are available in what kind of like states, and so on. So there is also like ontology based techniques. So this is more like transforming or mapping the data from different data sets into a common data structure, and then you perform the integration. So let's look at this in detail in the next slide. Okay, this is a very quick, introduction to ontologies. An ontology is a knowledge representation structure which describes the domain of discourse. So the idea is to make the data more self-describing, right? You may be familiar with database tables, SQL schemas, and such. So ontologies are one such representation structure, but more intelligent than those table structures. Why? Because you can incorporate a lot of constraints, characteristics, and set different properties to different entities like, class, subclass relationship, and so on. So all these make the data more self-describing. Okay. So an ontology is represented as a set of triples. So you have like subject, you have a predicate, and then an object. So the subject is known as a class or a concept, and predicate is also known as property, attribute, or relationship. And object can be a class or some constant value. So this is like the schema, right? Something like your table headers or column names. You can map, something called instances, which are very similar to individual records or individual rows in your relational table. So you can map those instances to the schema. For example, we have a schema here which says person lives in city, and then you have an instance which says, like Booma lives in Chicago. So Booma here is an instance, and it is of type person. So person is like your class, and Booma is like the record or one of the instances of that particular class. These ontologies can be, expressed using specific languages. Like you have web ontology language, which is called OWL, and resource description framework, which is called RDF. So there are like a lot of languages with which you can express ontologies. And then there is something called ontology matching. So it is, like the way to establish relationships between the concepts in two or more ontologies. So say, for example, one ontology represents, like temperature, and then another ontology represents humidity for a given location. So you, like just map or you establish, like correspondences, like whether one class or one instance in an ontology is equivalent or is similar to another instance in another ontology, right? Like whether one, for example, if this is about daily data and if this is about hourly data, if this hour is representing, like that particular day, data for that particular day. So you can establish those kind of correspondences or relationships between different instances and concepts between two ontologies. So when you map just the schema, it is called ontology matching. And when you map these instances between, like two different ontologies, then it is called instance mapping. So it's not just, like two ontologies. You can just do it with one or more ontologies. When you are using one or more ontologies, it will be more like you have like a common schema, and then you map your data to that common schema. And there are like a lot of tools available out there, a couple of them being Agreement Maker Lite and Agreement Maker, which are developed at UIC. It is like a set of, like different algorithms to match strings, to match spatial data, and to match different, like kinds of data, including biomedical ontologies. So these tools, like they are readily available out there. Maybe, like you can download those tools and then you can adopt them to your scenarios. And this is how an ontology look like. This is a screenshot from a tool called Prodigy, which is used to develop ontologies. On the left pane that you see here, you see all of those concepts in the domain. So this is like the schema that we discussed. So they are organized as classes and subclasses. And on the right pane, you see how these classes and subclasses are connected to each other. Each colored arrow represents different properties or relationships between these classes. The reason why this topic of spatial heterogeneity is important is due to a wide range of real world scenarios that are very crucial and requires GDI. They pose a lot of challenges that need to be explored and resolved. So here's one scenario which we worked on with the City of Chicago's Department of Innovation and Technology. Let's say there is a business at some location, and the city administration would like to know everything about that business so as to schedule an inspection, or you need to monitor the quality of food, or perform disease prevention and control, and so on. So to do this, we need to integrate data from different sources. For example, all of the licenses for that business will be stored in a different data set, and the data for food inspections is in a different data set, both of which, by the way, are open data set from the City of Chicago, and you can find them in opengrid.io, so which is the open data portal for Chicago. And we also take data from Google Places and Yelp for their reviews, and each of them exhibit like one or more of the challenges that we discussed earlier. In particular, each data set can have its own data source, different tools and techniques used to collect data by different people, leading to different formats like, we see CSVs, we see XML, JSON, maps, and whatnot. So they may even have non-standard identifiers, sometimes depending on the data set or depending on who is collecting the data. So there could be imperfections in data affecting the quality. For example, a food safety inspector can record business with different names or incorrect spellings, write in short forms, and even worse, they may even skip the business names or address fields. This is like much more common than you can imagine. So when we looked at the food inspections data for the City of Chicago, there is this grocery chain called Jewel-Osco. In some data sets, it is just mentioned as Jewel-Osco. In some data sets, it is Jewel. In another data set, it is Osco. So, and even 7-Eleven, the chain, it is referred to as 7-11 in numbers, and in others, it is 7-Eleven in words. So there are a lot of these imperfections, or like heterogeneities in data. And apart from this, there could also be different entrances to a building, which leads to different addresses. For example, like malls have 4 or 5 different entrances, and each of them will have like different street addresses, right? And there are also different business names like DBA, which is called doing business as name, and then there will be legal name, also known as name, and so on. For example, the Starbucks that you see in the airport, right? It could have a different, like doing business as name, or also known as name in the data set business licenses. So they can have license under different names. So, like it could just not be represented as Starbucks. Right. And then there are multiple names and addresses. There are co-located business. For example, a grocery store can sell alcohol. Starbucks sell all those coffee mugs and water bottles. So they need different licenses to sell different products, which means one business can have multiple different records in business license data set depending on what they are selling, right? And that could also be, the integration framework should also have the capability to include new data sets in the future. So we are going to look at how to resolve such challenges in spatial data. And considering we have different data sources for this scenario, each business can have 0 or more records from each of the data source. So we consider data sets with sufficient or crucial information. For example, the data sets that show debarred businesses, even if there are only 10 records in the data set, they are very important. So some of the data sets that we considered for this work is, business licenses and food inspections and contracts and permits. So all of these were, like part of the City of Chicago's open data portal. And let's consider, like for example, you have 2 different data sets here. One, for example, business types. So you have the name and address of that business, and then what type of business it is, whether it is a cafe or is it a grocery store or is it a bank, and so on. And you also have another data set, which is Yelp. And obviously, like Yelp has, a lot of reviews. So the crux of our approach here is that we extract non-key features. In our case, it would be the business names and addresses into a common data structure, which we call the unified data model. So this unified data model, aka the model for integrated data, it is initially empty. So we then compare every record in the source data set with the instances in the data model. If we find a match, we extract and add only the attributes that are not already present for this business to this data model. Otherwise, we create a new instance. So it's more like, you have multiple different data sets, and then the unified data model, it will be initially empty. And whenever you are comparing, like two businesses from different source, you will just add first the name and address of that business, and then like we will see in data set one we have business types info. When it is parsed, we check whether we have the name and address in the unified data model already. So yes, we do. And since we have that, we just add like that additional feature, which in our case is business type. Similarly, when we look at data set 4, we look at the reviews, and then we add that data right here. And like we like discussed earlier, like some of the businesses can have data in some data sets, and some of them might not have data in the other data sets, right? So this is just the basic concept, and let's see how like ontologies can help here. Okay, so while populating the unified data model, if we start comparing all of the records with everything, which is like, Starbucks in Chicago versus Starbucks in Seattle, there is no point. It's just that, like the number of comparisons is going to be like way too large. So we use something called blocking, which ensures only relevant pairs of records are compared. So we compare, like Starbucks with the Starbucks in that particular locality we are talking about, that particular street or zip code that we are talking about, right? So this blocking ensures relevant pairs of records are compared, and it avoids the combinatorial explosion using known fields that have to be exactly the same between different pairs of records that are being compared. For example, the city, state, and zip code should be the same for you to compare one record with another. And we use spatial ontology. So this like image right here is a partial spatial ontology. It's just a snapshot from the spatial ontology that we have created. And this ontology organizes records into hierarchical structure based on like county, state, city, and so on. So it is built to expand and include businesses from any state or city. So it's not just focused on Chicago. Tomorrow, if you want to include data for like the state of Washington or the state of California, you should be able to do it, right? So by classifying the data instances into this hierarchy, we can minimize the combinatorial explosion of comparisons by limiting the potential pairs to belong to the same class. For example, you are going to compare only those instances that belong to the same city and the same zip code. And we also have something called domain ontology. So a domain ontology refers to an ontology which has instances related to that particular domain. In our case, we are talking about business, so we call it business ontology, right? And it classifies the establishments based on different types of businesses. It could be restaurants, children's services, banking, schools, and so on. So using these classifications, two businesses with the same name across different business types, they are not compared. So it saves time as well as improves the quality of results. For example, let's say there is a restaurant called Pete's, okay, and there is a grocery store called Pete's. So you don't compare, like even though the grocery store Pete's and the restaurant Pete's are located in the same zip code, you won't compare both of them. Why? Because they belong to different business type, okay. And how do we know that? With the help of domain ontology. Okay, so we also have something called target ontology, which is like which has the instances of the unified data model. So whatever we saw right here, so all of these will be organized as different ontologies, and eventually unified data model is also represented as an ontology, and in our case we call that as the target ontology. Okay, so this target ontology, it has instances of the unified data model. Each instance will contain a hierarchical structure of data objects that represent different aspects of business, like business name, key value pairs, and like a lot of key value pairs like we saw here. So the key is business type and the value is cafe, and and so on. And yeah, so looking at like some of our experimental results, what I mean, like we considered data for the zip code 60606 in Chicago, which is the polygon, like showed in red here. And looking at the data for that zip code, we had like 3,500 plus unique businesses in that area. And among those 3,500 unique businesses, there were more than 16,000 different business licenses associated with the 3,500 businesses. So, for example, one grocery store selling alcohol, selling bakery items, selling meat, they all have different licenses for each of those products that they are selling. So we have like more number of business licenses compared to like the number of businesses themselves. And when we also looked at food inspections, we were able to match only like 96.7% of those food inspections record with the businesses, like the number of food inspections performed at different businesses. So it is mostly because like there were incorrect or no entry in the data set. A lot of reasons like invalid addresses, or like they were eliminated by blocking as zip codes did not match, and so on. So to perform that matching itself, to see whether like one business is similar to another, or one address, one spatial component is similar to another, we used like a set of matchers. Okay, so it is a combination of different matchers with logics ranging from like checking for string equality or Levenstein distance, and like cleaned versions of isub, meaning like you remove all of the special characters from the names, and so on. And at a point, we also implemented the stop word match and acronym matches. So we removed all the stop words like the, and so on, and also acronyms like KFC, and we implemented it, but we didn't use it as much because they were giving a lot of false positives. So whenever we wanted to determine similarity, we looked at three different similarities. One, whether the businesses are similar, whether they belong to the same business type, and whether they belong to the same business category. And address similarity is like whether the state zip code and the street addresses, whether they are same. And then we also looked at the city state zip similarity. This is the city state zip similarity. We used it mostly for blocking that we discussed earlier. So the final similarity was a combination of all of these similarities, like the average of business address and state. So we also set a threshold, like when you are comparing two business names, if the similarity is less than 90%, you don't even compare any of the other things. Like you don't compare the street address, or you don't even consider it for comparison. So here is the subset of results from our integration approach. So, like if you look at, I have just listed food inspections and business licenses just for the sake of simplicity. And if you look at, like the first record in the database, you say new city daycare, and then you have a set of address, right? And these, the record in the food inspections and business license is just the same. So the similarity is one, which is 100% similar. Okay, so we just like consider them as a match, and then we integrate the data from food inspection and business license. But if you look at like the record 4 or the instance 4, you have Jelly Bean Learning Center, and the address is 7411 South Cottage Grove Avenue 60619. Whereas in business licenses, you have a different street address, but the zip code is still 60619. Since the address, the street address is different, the similarity reduces like drastically. It's 0.53, but we had a threshold, right? In the previous slide, we looked at the threshold, which is like, we need 90% similarity. So based on that similarity, like it doesn't meet the threshold, so we don't compare this. So we determine that these two, like instances are different. They are not one and the same. And if you look at the last instance listed here, you have a different zip code like 60608 and 60615. So they are different zip codes, even though the names are like kind of similar, like early childhood center. We don't compare them because our technique called blocking it says, oh, you know what, the zip codes are different. There is no way that these two businesses could be one and the same. So this is like like a subset of the results from the integration approach. And this one is some food for thought. So listed here are some open problems that may benefit from geospatial data integration, given that we have a lot of open data. For example, we have a number of data sets related to COVID, such as age group, population, and so on. So to answer questions like, which zip code is the worst affected by COVID, we need spatial data integration. So the correlations between confirmed COVID-19 cases and age group, population density, public transit use. So to do all this, we need integration of data from different sources, right? And thanks to the ubiquitous sensors, for example, like array of things that measures different features like noise, pollution, and so on, and also open data portals, GPS, and whatnot, we have plenty of data for a lot of smart city applications. For example, let's say there is so much traffic on a Monday morning from street A to street B, we may need to look at what businesses are located along that route, like schools, colleges, hospitals, banks, grocery stores, and identify whether we may need to add more buses to that route, and during what hours, during their business hours, during the non-business hours, when is the crowd more. So it is one of the example for a smart city application. And another example where we could leverage GDI is the surveillance towards malaria elimination and to identify the risk of malaria re-emergence. So it is important to consider different factors such as change in land cover. It could be due to droughts and floods, population growth, population health, for example, like sickle cell disease, and location of healthcare facilities that, like not only influence each other, but also impact the number of malaria cases and deaths. So it is vital to integrate the data associated with these factors to enable prediction of where the disease incidence is more likely to increase or decrease. So this enhances the effectiveness of malaria elimination programs. There are hundreds of such open problems out there in the real world, and I hope this talk has, like inspired some of you to identify and explore the what's, whys, and hows of those scenarios, and leverage spatial data analytics to solve them. With that, I thank you all for attending this talk and wish you the best. I will open up the forum for any questions.
Thank you so much, Bhuma. So someone was asking about the geospatial tools. If you could repeat the names of those tools.
Oh, I can actually show you. So, like some of them, oops, let me, okay. Okay, I'm just trying to show you some here. Okay, so do you see my screen?
Yeah, we do see it.
Awesome. So there are a lot of, like geospatial analytics tools. ArcGIS and QGIS are, a couple of them. So one of the open source tools out there, and which is one of my favorites, is QGIS. So, with QGIS, you can actually, like load geospatial data, like look at them, view, edit, or even analyze them. So say, for example, here I have loaded, like land use data, and, in a bit, I'll also show you buildings data. So land use data, this is, like a shapefile, which I have loaded here. And yeah, I'm sorry that it is taking a bit more time, but yeah, like there are a lot of analysis that you can do with such tools. For example, you can find whether a particular point is inside a polygon. You can say whether a city is present inside a state, or and so on. And you also have a lot of geoprocessing tools wherein you can determine whether, like two polygons intersect each other, whether, you can dissolve those polygons, and so on. And there are also a bunch of geometry tools out there, and they are so cool. Like you can check, a lot of things, like you can convert polygons to lines, you can join different lines to polygons, and so on. It is taking a lot of time. I'm sorry.
No worries.
But yeah, so if you click at any of these, I know, but in general, this tool is not like that. Okay, so okay, so if you want to like look at what are the different features that this particular region has, you can also look at them right here. You can see, okay, the land use code for this is like 1111, which is kind of a residential area, I suppose. And you also have the length of that particular polygon, the area of the polygon, and you can also see the coordinates of that polygon and so on. And one thing that I wanted to show you about heterogeneity is, like, okay, yeah, now we have loaded the land use data. And if we look at the projections is like, the way you represent the latitude and longitude. Come on. Okay, I think it is because I'm sharing the screen.
No worries.
It's like super slow.
That's okay.
Yeah, so if you look at the projection, like sometimes you see data like minus 83 point something and minus 42 point something. Okay, it showed up in my other monitor. Gosh. Okay, so if you see, like for the land use data that we have, the coordinate reference system is something different, right? And if I load the buildings data, for example, okay, so this is the land use for Chicago, and I'm loading the buildings data for the city of Chicago. Ideally, you should be able to see them, like one on top of each other. But right now, you won't be able to see it because, the coordinate reference system is different compared to, the other data set. It's terribly slow, but I guess you get the idea of, like
Definitely.
what
Yeah.
you can do that. Yep.
So there's ArcGIS, QGIS. I've put those links.
Sure.
And yeah, pretty cool.
Okay.
I didn't realize how much there is to heterogeneous geospatial data.
Yep.
And you mentioned the project as well. Like if someone wants to look it up, you.
Oh, I mean, like, you can look at my, like Google Scholar profile, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So, like there are like a bunch of projects that we have been working on, mostly as part of my research. But yeah, like if you are looking at some open data problem out there and, like you want to collaborate or something, I'm always open to it.
That's really nice.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bhuma.
Thank you.
We really, really enjoyed that. And
Yep.
thank you to everyone else who joined. And sad that the conference is almost over, but we do have one last session at the end. Do try and join that. And thank you. Thank you once again. Nice meeting you, Bhuma.
Yeah, thank you, Navati, and thank you all for attending. Yeah, and have a good one.
Yeah, take care. Have a good
Thank you.
weekend.
Yeah, thank you, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.